This episode is brought to you by Elevate OS, the only all-in-one community operating system. Elevate OS transforms property management, combining resident engagement, reservations, rent payments, maintenance, and concierge services into a single super app. It also uniquely integrates access control, intercoms, package lockers, and thermostats, eliminating app fatigue and redefining modern apartment living. Visit elevateos.com/MMN for a free demo and see how they can help you level up your operations. It is that time of the week again where you pick up your favorite beverage. For me, tumbler. Proud Mary. Coffee is made in Portland. Well, the coffee bean is not, but it is roasted in Portland, Oregon, which is one of my favorite cities in America. But it's that time of the week again where you pick up your favorite beverage along with your favorite writing utensil. For me, it's tall. Nobody paid me to say that. Tall. And your favorite notebook to write in. Today, I met with Landon Cooley, who is the CEO, co-founder at Pest Share. I was telling Landon that in the 20 years I've been creating content for the multifamily space in the arena of social media, have I ever talked about pests? I don't think I've ever talked about pests, not even in a loose remark or otherwise. In any content that I've created, I've never talked about pest control or pests. And Landon and I unpacked pests in a way that I never have, because I never have. So it was an interesting conversation. Landon is a salt of the earth gentleman based up in Idaho. And he was generous enough to talk to us about how there is an evolution taking place. And I think his company is at the forefront of this evolution as it relates to pest control, not only in the data collection and what you can do with that data from a predictive perspective and otherwise, but really how that is shifting and evolving the way that we provide service to our end user, our end customer, and that is the person who lives in our community, or potentially people who will live in our communities at some point in time. So we unpack everything from the model as it exists today and what is broken about that, 3 big mistakes that operators traditionally make when they're thinking about pest control. We talk about centralization as it relates to pest control. That was very interesting, that piece of the conversation. We talked about the data collection and what he sees as the future use for that data, especially in the predictive world. It was just a very genuine and awesome conversation with someone who just knows the pest control industry inside and out. He shares a nugget at the very beginning that was just amazing to me. And I just encourage you to watch it and listen to it. It's just amazing where his expertise comes from. So with that being said, please pick up your favorite beverage, your favorite writing utensil, your favorite notebook, and get ready for this information-packed episode with Landon Cooley from Pest Share. Landon, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Mike.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited about this. I know we were talking just a little bit before we hit the record button. I know you're up in Idaho. We were just up in Idaho, my wife and I, and you live in a beautiful area of the country.
Oh, thank you. We're big fans of Idaho, that's for sure. We've raised our kids here and totally enjoyed it here. It's been great.
Yeah, it's I got to tell you, it's we described it as God's country when we were driving through, on the hills of driving through Nebraska, where it's very windy. So we were complaining a lot about blowing around the road, but I knew it was like a nice reprieve. So
it's great. Happy you enjoyed it.
thank you. Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I've been doing this podcast. So I've been writing content and putting it out on the internet for, I think, 20 years plus or minus now. And that's evolved from blogs into videos and interviews like this one. And I have never, ever talked about the topic of pests or pest control or bugs or otherwise. This is a first for me, and it's awesome. I'm excited about
it. As is usually the case when we do these in the space, it's I feel like we've been working on kind of a sleepy pain point that everyone deals with, but nobody talks a lot about.
It's so true. I spent time in nearly every seat in the property management world, starting out as a service technician and all the way up. But pests were always there. It's a through line in my entire career. So, it is a topic where everybody thinks that it's just this thing that exists. It's a pain point. It's a necessary evil. All the things that are associated with it. I have never thought about the model being broken because it just never gave a lot of thought to it. It was just like this consistent thing that just happened on a monthly basis. But is the model broken? I want to hear from you.
Yeah.
We're in this space. Tell us about how this model was
Yeah.
broken.
I'll back into this just with some personal experience. So I mentioned to you before the call too. I've been in the industry my whole life. I'm actually fourth generation in my family in the pest control industry. My great grandpa in 1920 immigrated from Ireland, and in 1927 started doing pest control here in the U.S. And since it's been a thing in our family. So I can honestly say I've been the technician working with on-site managers, treating apartments for bed bugs and cockroaches, whatever it's been, throughout my career. And for a long time before Pest Share, we probably had a little bit of a similar perspective. Every community needs it. It's kind of this necessary evil. And we had this approach that we took on the pest control side that frankly was frustrating for us. It never seemed like we could really stay on top of things. There was this pressure to meet a budget, but yet like there's often things that broke that. And so you kind of come up with something that I guess checks the box, but at the same time, we often found that people weren't having a great experience. And fast forward today, that's very much the reason why we developed Pest Share, why we're here. And I think that a good way to look at this, and when, I think you teed it up very well, that's a common response we get of like, oh, deal with that. I hadn't really thought about that. But I think the best perspective is think about the resident experience. What's it like for residents? I've read a few things now that pest control is like in the top 5 reasons why residents move out of their unit, and top 5 reason for churn. And often when I have this conversation, I'll get that initial response. And as I ask them, well, do you think you're losing residents right now across your portfolio to cockroaches? And it's like pretty unequivocally, usually, yeah, or bed bugs, fleas, whatever it is. And so, through that lens, you start to ask yourself why, and start to back into that. And there's all these, there's several parts of it. I mean, pests can easily spread unit to unit. What is one problem can turn into 15 problems in a given community. I think there's layers within the, I guess what is the operational process or kind of standard practice for on-site managers and for their teams to deal with it that is fragmented or broken, or it's kind of inconvenient for everybody. Oftentimes we see it's difficult to, if I'm a resident, it's difficult to get to, I have a problem, I need to report that problem, I need to get, coordinated now with the service technician, get them in my unit. Got an on-site team that's like kind of in the middle, and just generally that process is a challenge, I think, for a lot of areas of maintenance, but in pest control especially. And so yes, at a high level, we absolutely believe it's broken. We can go into all nooks and crannies and details as of why, but that's my first shot at it, summarizing it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love that. And you set up a really great segue. If you think about, my imagination tells me, and I'll speak from my own experience, there are mistakes that we make as operators, right? If I'm sitting in the property manager's chair or system manager's chair, or even a maintenance supervisor's chair who might be directly responsible for setting up that sort of coordination or graphing the pest control process. I imagine there are a lot of mistakes. If we had to pick maybe 2 or 3 that you would highlight that operators generally make, and not to indict operators, but just, hey, here are the things.
No. Yeah, it's again, no one's at fault here. This is just, I think if you look at every business model, every industry, there's parts that could be better.
Yeah.
And we live in a world with technology, especially where we're now having the ability to pick nuanced niche pain points and solve those, especially in the world of AI. I mean, AI, you think of the integration abilities in our space, especially, and we can now fix these things. And so I think of pest control in that category. And so what are some of the mistakes? I think first and foremost, it starts with the resident. Residents inevitably struggle to report pest control issues. And when you back out of that and you ask yourself why, well, there's, the most basic level, there's a degree of embarrassment. It's, I've got bed bugs, I've got cockroaches. And there's also potential cost implications. And in most markets, the residents are, if you look at tenant landlord law, typically the residents are responsible once you've got to give them pest free unit. Once they're in, it's typically their problem. And so there's some fear of cost. You go through, there's several elements there, but we tend to just see that first. And so we end up in a situation where essentially I'd say like problem one, we're waiting for issues to surface. And pest control within multifamily, again, we have adjoined units. And when we think about pest control in the space, even in broader property management, we're typically not overly concerned about I saw a spider, although that's not fun. My wife married me because I kill spiders for a living, let me tell you. But
That makes two of us.
it's yeah. So there's kind of this general pest category where maybe we're less afraid. We kind of think of this of those pests are probably not going to make a resident move out.
Sure.
Then you have another subset of pests when we talk cockroaches, bed bugs, fleas, rodents, those types of pests. They will. I mean, those are horrible to live with, and those. And the problem with those is they have the ability to easily spread unit to unit to unit. And so as we are sitting there kind of reacting and waiting to hear, or waiting for these issues to pop up, they very well could be spreading like a plague within the community. So I think, high level, that's a mistake that's made. Kind of in connection with that, there's oftentimes an assumption that I have recurring service on this property, whether that's just that's a traditional pastoral company coming out once every other week, once a month, whatever it is. Sometimes they're spraying around the buildings or they have some bait stations out. But there's this assumption that because I have that, I won't have pest control problems. I'm good. And again, one of the biggest misconceptions in pest control is that spraying around the outside of a building solves all pest control problems. And if we take that kind of subset of pest issues I described, the roaches, the bed bugs, et cetera, and we analyze those, typically those cannot be prevented. I mean, if I spray around, especially in an apartment community, I spray around a 4-story building, it's going to do nothing to stop the roaches. But even despite that, roaches are typically brought into the unit. Bed bugs are typically brought into the unit. Usually these are being brought in and they're spreading as a result of, it could be, sometimes it's living conditions, sometimes it's things related to the structure. But all to be said, we get this kind of a challenge of like, okay, well, crap, I thought that was solving it. It's not. Now I'm dealing with this issue, and we really tend to lack a good tool there to properly handle that. Once they are, they've happened, they're spreading, et cetera. But nonetheless, we often will get that of, assumption, I think I'm okay because if I have a recurring service. And then probably the last thing I'll just say on this is a mistake that's made is what we started this conversation with. Pest control is I call it a quiet pain point. It sits there. It's sneaky. It's something you probably deal with or your on-site team will deal with every single day. Yet you don't really hear about it a whole lot at the headquartered office because it's just this, it's become a reality of the space. It's something we just deal with. The reality is it's a top reason that residents churn and decide to move out of the community, which we know is the single biggest trigger for impact on NOI. And so whether it's people moving out or it's just bad reviews, all those are things are reality when it comes to pest control in the space. And yeah, they hit the bottom line. Everyone's trying to drive up NOI, and I think that's a quiet pain point that's slowly killing NOI. And so, and maybe not even slowly in some cases, but
Sure.
it's absolutely impacting it. But yeah, those are a few that common mistakes or things that are overlooked, I think, when it comes to pest control.
Yeah, and not to get too far off track, but I recall you just brought it to mind in terms of NOI impact. I was working in St. Louis, Missouri, to your point about someone bringing bed bugs into an apartment. And at that time, it was interesting. I won't be able to recall the year. Let's say it was 2007, 2008. Bed bugs were just like, it's almost like they just came to be. And I'm sure they were around forever, but it's like they just became mainstream. Anyway, long story short, we spent $12,000, literally $12,000. I remember that number because I was sitting around a board table or boardroom, and the owner was like, "What?"
Yeah.
Like, look, we had to heat the apartment up to some god-awful temperature to get these things to die. And then after that, we had to help the resident clean them all out. So anyway,
I
It really can
I
impact, right? In a big way.
I had a very similar experience. I pre-Pest Share, again, this was kind of like as the idea and concepts of Pest Share were developing, but yeah, we had so I actually own my partners and I own a traditional pastoral company still here in Idaho where we live. We work with all sorts of residential commercial clients, and yeah, a very similar experience. We had a longtime customer. We were just a traditional pastoral vendor for them. Got a call about this is like a boutique kind of garden style multifamily property that so they're no on-site manager. They're managing it off-site, and yeah, maybe 50 units. I call it probably like a C-class property, and so there was this kind of consistent effort just to keep up on maintenance and whatnot. But yeah, long story short, got bugs in one unit. No one reported anything. No one said anything. By the time we got on site to inspect, we actually got a canine and took a canine through all the units, and there was 15 units of a 50 unit complex with bed bugs. And I want to say the cost ended up being like just shy of $30,000 of what it took to treat those units. And I mean, we're as a traditional vendor, we were trying to cut them a deal, whatever. But it's like, hey, this is a major project, and
Mhm.
when we were developing Pest Share, as a founder, I was stopping and thinking like, I had kind of my entrepreneurial hat on when looking back at that. I'm like, how could we have aligned with the property manager and the resident to all be incentivized to stop that at unit one? Because in this case, that property manager, they were third party managing it. The owner sold the property as a result. They lost management of 50 units, and I think they managed 1,000 units. So it's like not the end of the world, but like that's a big punch to the gut in terms of their unit count. It just sucks for everyone, let alone the residents. And so
Yeah, yeah.
I think a lot of people have stories like that in the space where it's that or roaches, ants, rodents, whatever it is, and it can turn into a disaster pretty quick for everybody.
Very fast. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure we could trade stories all day because you just brought other things to mind. We'll just explode it. Um, so so centralization is a hot topic in the multifamily industry. It's interesting to me because I worked for Equity Residential, let's say it was 20 years ago, plus minus, and we had started our centralization sort of effort at that time. Equity did, I didn't. I was just part of the system, but and it was really taking an assistant manager and putting them over 3 properties, and they would handle administrative duties for that. So let's fast forward to today. Centralization has taken on a whole new meaning, I think, or it's sort of come to the point where technology has met up with business systems or processes and workflows, and now it can work in reality. Talk to us about how the pest control space is taking advantage and or implementing their service under this centralization theme or thematic.
Yeah. Great topic. And so I think this is where we're very unique at, as a company, as Pest Share. I'll kind of give just a quick high level on what Pest Share is, and I think it will explain this really well and the differences or kind of the challenges when it comes to pest control in the space. So at Pest Share, we're a pure technology company. Our job is to come in and totally bite off the whole pest control pain point. And I would say where we're unique is being a technology platform. We have the ability to integrate with common software platforms in the space, whether it's your core management software or other maintenance tools, et cetera. And again, ultimately, our job is to get in and find what is the most succinct way to interact with the resident, the property manager, and then ultimately we provide a whole nationwide vendor network as well, of which we're interacting with. Um, and so in our experience, what we've created is the opportunity for a resident to essentially leverage a pest control, like pest identification tool and inspection tool, where they can self-inspect, self-diagnose pest control problems and report them and request service for them. And then we've developed a unique subscription model where we cover high ticket, again, coming back to the bed bugs and the cockroaches, these things, expensive pest control treatments for a relatively low cost by, essentially it's almost like a warranty style product. So you get coverage, certain pests, you come in, the resident on their own can identify and request very accurately different pest control needs. And if then we typically have like a coverage that's in place that provides a frictionless experience as if they put in like an insurance claim. And whether it's that or maybe it's a landlord related expense, it's termites, let's say, we can take any pest control problem through our network, get best pricing, service it, and allow the resident ultimately directly interact with scheduling their own service, direct with the vendor, go all the way to service completion, collect all the data, reporting everything without on-site team involvement, without any sort of property management or very little property management involvement. And so, um, so with all of that in mind, how did we get here, and why are we here? What are we doing? Again, you said it well. I mean, the industry is consistently trying to centralize as much as operations as possible. I think when you get into maintenance, when you get into procurement, vendor management, that gets hard, especially if you're a national player, you're playing in multiple markets. Like, I think everyone would love one nationwide company that give them a great price that would integrate with their software. And when you get into skilled trades, like that's just not a reality in most cases. A lot of professional service companies, whether it's pastoral or HVAC or plumbing, whatever it is, like they typically are not super technologically inclined, relatively limited, which really hurts you in terms of communication across portfolio, data, insights. You ultimately just really know what's going on within that pain point. So, in pest control, I think specifically is just traditional pest control is absolutely when we come into the space, we walk into a trade show. That's what we're seeing happening. We see national operators with hundreds of thousands of units that have on-site teams working with local pest control companies. Like there's just no connection from top to bottom. And sometimes there is a little bit, or maybe regionally there is, or like there's this attempt to. I think in pest control specifically, one thing that's challenging is the market is comprised of a lot of small, mom and pop up to maybe mid-level players that are maybe operating regionally. And then we have a couple big brands, the Terminexes, the Orkins of the world, and even they operate very regionally. Like if I called Terminex and said, "Hey, I've got 20 communities across the country. Can I get bids on them?" They're going to probably send me to 20 different branch managers or sales teams within branches to go and take care of it. So all of this makes it tricky. And again, this is where we're unique. I mean, we very much have the ability at Pest Share to we have a service network that operates nationally under our umbrella. But again, I think we're really unique is actually being able to technically integrate and create transparency to where you could be sitting looking at a portfolio and ultimately come in and click into a given property or a given region and start to get insights. And again, it's one thing to have the convenience of just great, like I don't got to deal with
Yeah.
50 different vendors and all of these markets, but actually to be able to see that given problem pastoral itself holistically across the portfolio and have a sense of what's going on there and how it's being solved. We're really unique in that regard, and by no means are we perfect in it, but I think what we are continually the way we're innovating, the way we're curating the experience is very much with centralization in mind and trying to focus on the most important metrics and whatnot that matter to our customers.
I'm curious as it relates to that sort of a curation of vendor set across the country under one umbrella, and I'm keying off of another service that doesn't come to mind readily, but what does come to mind readily is that if there is a service provider that is providing a service to one of your clients or end users, if that service isn't acceptable to me, the operator, is there sort of a stack ranking that you have incorporated in your platform that says, hey, 4-star or like 2-star review this guy, the next guy
Yeah.
comes in? Is that how it works? Just curious.
Yeah. No, you're dead on. So what we do is rather than saying, okay, I'm going to go into, you mentioned St. Louis. I'm going to go into St. Louis. I'm going to find one real good company to do all my work for me, which
Yeah.
has its pros. Like being able to know, oh, I got this company and maybe even that technician that's just going to be here every time. Like there's convenience to that, but
Sure.
ultimately you end up inevitably that's going to fail. What we feel is the best approach is, hey, I'm actually going to go find 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Typically, we average about 3 providers per zip code. That's like our team that handles all of our operations. That's their charge. We have markets like Atlanta, for example, where I think we have 8 providers in that market, and what we do first, like we have we have a certain qualifications they have to meet to even be in our network, which I would say are above the property management industry standard. We're leveraging our pest control expertise to say, hey, this is what we think is the best provider. And of course, they have all the licenses, everything from a compliance side. And then what we do is we start giving them work and we're tracking certain key metrics, things like speed of service. We pull resident reviews post service and we use that into the kind of that prioritization stack, cost of service. And we're leveraging all of those things to ultimately control flow of work. And so our people that stack the best, we're ultimately going to get the most of the majority of the work. At the same time, maybe we're giving them a 70% of the work because they're best performer. We're still going to keep workflow open to the rest of providers because we also want speed. I mean, any one company can't be anywhere all at once. In the space, we often see it takes, Kyle, 2-3 weeks, I don't think is even unheard of to get from like tenant has a problem to great, we're servicing. We average about 3 days in our company. And so it's leveraging a collective network that allows us to do that while providing best in class service too.
Yeah, got it. That it just it seemed like that particular business model. I wish I could remember what it was, but from an operator's perspective, right? It was very advantageous in that if service for whatever reason lagged or wasn't good, it was like a real-time fix.
Oh yeah. Well, and we can easily, I would say we pride ourselves in that this typically isn't a problem, but like, say you had a bad experience with a company, like the flip of a switch and boom, that company's not coming on site
Right.
anymore. And
Right.
we always have this like safety net of other providers that we're driving, trying to drive best performance from. But again, I think of the years we've been doing this and the hundreds of thousands of units that we provide service for. There's been one time where something hit my plate, at least as the CEO of the company, where it was like, hey, here's a problem. And I would still say like it was debatable. It was one resident's perspective that could have potentially been taken out of context. But even then, we're like, hey, no problem. Flip the switch. Great. They won't be on at that property anymore or dealing with your portfolio anymore, and that's navigable. But it's a real challenge though, and that's hard for an on-site manager, traditionally speaking, or a maintenance coordinator, where they you finally get one good company that's taking care of it. You're in contract with them, maybe even,
Right.
and then have a bad experience, and it's like I got to unwind that now just for pest control, and I'm dealing with 10 other maintenance needs on this property all the time. It's a real headache.
Yeah, I would tell you from all my years of experience, that in and of itself is a key selling point. Just because of everything that you just cited, it is a time suck to go out and try to find somebody new if something goes wrong, and the fact that you have something like that that just makes it happen is, yeah.
I mean, it's service is tough. It's never perfect, but
Sure.
I think what's important, like a principle I've kind of stood behind, is inevitably maintenance problems are going to happen. Pest control issues are going to happen.
That's right.
Very hard to prevent them from happening. When they happen, though, there's an opportunity for incredible resident experience despite like
That's right.
that. A plumbing leak or whatever, maybe a really bad one's a tough one to get at, but like whatever it is, like that happens. Inevitably, the residents can be upset. But if you can quickly respond, if you
That's
can
right.
give them a platform, a medium which they can easily request, like you can look like the hero. And in a way, it's almost like because you had something bad happen, you ended up looking better than you would have despite. At the same time, if you don't, you are the villain. Now, it's could be the reason they're gonna try to get out of their lease, or they're gonna start counting down the days till that lease ends and they can move out. And again, I think that's the frame of mind we try to stay in, is how do we make them stay in the property and stay longer despite pastoral problems are gonna happen, they're inevitable, and despite that fact.
Yeah, that I like that, and I want to use that sort of as a segue. Some of the prep work we did for this conversation, one of the things that struck me is you take pest control from reactive to predictable, and you're spot on. You're not going to eliminate every single pest in every single apartment across the country. It just doesn't. That's just not reality. But taking that, what could otherwise be chaos, and making it predictable, unpack that for us. How do you do that?
Yeah, I think it all starts with the resident as kind of the, in our case, they're the end user on the platform. we feel like we all know residents are hard to fully satisfy. You're never going to fully satisfy them,
Sure.
and I
Yeah.
but if we can create an experience that really is a delight to the resident, if we can create a product that the resident really likes, inevitably it solves a lot of downchain problems. It makes
Sure.
the property managers happy, it makes asset owners happy. And so, um, so when we kind of start there, I think, at least in pest control, the first problem again comes back to the fact of, well, how do I create a situation where the resident will just say something? Like it is in everybody's interest the second they see the ant or whatever to at least say something, whether or not like it's extensive enough, it's one little spider, we're actually gonna do something about it. At least we know. And so we've started. So I think this is where technology comes into play. In Pasture, what we've essentially designed is a almost like an Uber style experience where on my phone I can easily get onto a platform that's it doesn't take much beyond common sense to utilize. You don't need to know a lot about pests. Yeah, all you really need to remember is your address. You plug in your address, your unit number, and boom, it pulls up in our system, and we kind of know everything we need to know about that property. And then we're going to be, then we leverage different tools to go in and identify the pest, like I said, and ultimately kind of get everything we need to know out of that resident. And so I think starting there, giving an easy button for the resident, capturing, our goal is to capture everything we possibly can, again, whether or not it's actionable, and be able to document all of that. And then how you integrate from there becomes the next step. We want to take that resident, give them as much control as possible, to ultimately being able to process, the service request, connecting them to provider scheduling, all of those things with as little involvement as possible from the property manager. The last thing they want is we're pinging them every time someone puts in, a service request.
Sure.
At the same time, though, you got to have certain guardrails. We all know if we gave the residents the keys and said, buy away, they're going to start buying away. And so we've had to, we've had to leverage certain product features and whatnot to be able to say, hey, here's this type of pest control issue. Great. Like in our case, we have a subscription plan in place. We have coverage in place. Great. Let that thing roll right through. There's no need for any additional charges or anything. We can go get that taken care of. At the same time, there's some situations where it's like, hey, that's kind of a petty thing. That's really the resident's responsibility. I, as a property manager, don't want to pay for that. See if you guys solved that. Pest Share, you solved that with the resident, and so we've created a marketplace, and we've created this kind of frictionless experience where we can give residents options for things that are their responsibility. And then again, there's this other bucket of things where it's like, oh crap, that's a squirrel in the attic because there's a hole in the eaves. Like that is the landlord's problem. And now, there's kind of a process here of, okay, we need to capture that. We need to inspect that. We need to service that. And we need to interact with the landlord through that. And so I'm kind of getting in the weeds here, but we've ultimately, at least in our case of Pastoral, tried to create the most simple yet robust platform possible to just allow that resident to go from problem to essentially a feeling of problem resolved within a matter of minutes. And then, I think the last element of this is, now, how do we, capture the right data points and integrate in the right way to where we're not this annoying platform with another login where if I want to see something, I have to go and like pull that report in this platform. Where I don't spend the majority of my time as a property manager. And I think that's very much a lot of what we're building today is like, I think it's table stakes to have a basic API integration with Yardi and or RealPage or whatever, and pull in basic door data. This next wave now of integrations in the space is that of like, now I want you deeply embedded within Yardi's maintenance, within Rent Cafe or within X company's maintenance product. And I'd say that's where a lot of our focus lies, so we can really create this smooth, frictionless experience, and then let the data live wherever the source of data is for our operators.
So let's key off that data word for a second, and we'll kind of bring things into a close. But if so, you're collecting data points. My imagination tells me that from a global perspective, you can sit back and you can see through lines from a resident behavior perspective or a resident experience perspective, but you're also seeing that from the operator, or let's call it the building, not necessarily the operator, but the building perspective. Are there key themes from a residence perspective, key themes from a building perspective that you could highlight for us?
Yeah, man. Short answer, absolutely. I think Pest Share as a company, we're living in this world where we are just a sponge of data right now. And again, like the pest data is one thing, but you touched on a really good point of like resident behavior becomes this other thing. And candidly, I think we're at a stage where we have hundreds of thousands of units on our platform. But that, just that, if we have hundreds of thousands, not necessarily millions of units of platform. And so to kind of key out to the stage we're at, and we have a lot of single family customers. We have this growing multifamily base now. And so like we are in this process right now of parceling out like between asset type, between property type, between resident type, and seeing like what is everybody doing here.
Yeah.
What I can tell you right now is that one thing we feel very confident in that like our customers would attest to is that as a result of Pest Share, residents fundamentally are having a much more positive resident experience. Like I think there's been this unequivocal validation of like this was a thing that was killing the resident experience, making residents move out, and causing a lot of operational friction and headache that inevitably is not or is a tremendously lower rate. And then NOI is ultimately being driven up as a result of that. We see it just within our reviews alone, like the overall satisfaction of residents coming through because what was a clunky, difficult process to get through, now they're having a really easy experience going through and getting a solution for it. And as a result, we're seeing more residents starting to interact with are reporting their pastoral problems, interacting with our software, and we're having like better maintenance practice ultimately taking place as a result of it. I think the next couple of years for us will be very interesting. We just raised a relatively large Series A. We're investing heavily into our technical product and specifically into our data team. And so like the next couple of years are starting to be very, very interesting to start to unpack, in really granular levels to start to see what you asked about of like behavior analysis and probably more solid data points around like direct NOI impact and stuff like that as we grow, but just start to unpack all of the data and that's coming through. And yeah, we will always be one that'll be transparent with that as well. Like we want our customers to be able to leverage that. And of course it brings value to us too. And we can show them that stuff.
Definitely. So before I give you an opportunity to share where people can find you, I'm interested, do you do this currently, and or do you see a future where you collect all this data, which is rich and powerful as it relates to developer potentially building multifamily? You could come in and advise prior to anything happening on a piece of dirt, like, hey,
yeah,
think about all this stuff. Here's the data to back it and build it this way.
Yeah, I mean, this is what's nutty is like we, by nature of the data that's coming in, the things we're collecting, we have hundreds of thousands of residents are inputting data in certain data points. One thing that we're working on right now that's totally unique, at least in the pest world, is the ability to actually predict when pest infestations are going to happen within a certain degree of accuracy. So we can pull a geographical pinpoint and say, here's the area, like here's the broader geographical information, here's the historical weather information, and then here's what we know about pests based off things that have happened in our platform. And probably the way we use that is like you're walking into a sales opportunity and here's the property. Hey, here's what we think is going to be happening in your property based on the asset type, the class of property is, and all of this data set. And we feel like our job in using this now is to, again, like we really, I hate to, I don't want to risk being like another bandwagon or jumping on the NOI ROI train, but like we think pastoral really is a major impact on it. So how can we do this to like really legitimately underwrite our product offering and pastoral as a pain point and help you think about it? Yeah, whether you're a developer, doing some underwriting on an asset or a new build, or just looking try to solve for the problem. But yeah, I mean literally just hired a PhD that's an entomologist that is a professor at University of Florida and Florida State that has like spent his career working in this type of predictive analysis with pests and to like help us solve for this. And it's yeah, I mean, I'll put on my geeky pest control hat, but like to me, that is gonna be really cool to see how we can leverage that in the space over time for sure.
I love that stuff. I love thinking about the future. I've been in the multifamily industry my entire life, and so anytime things come along that really are true innovation in our space, I get really geeked out by it as well. So yeah.
I kind of live by this idea of well, shoot, one of our core values is find a better way, and that like as an entrepreneur, my co-founders and I started this business. Like we were in this frame of mind of like pastoral's been done the same way since 1927 when my great grandpa started doing pest control. I mean, and when we look at property management collectively, we felt like the old way of doing it does not fit here. Like, how can we find a better way? And we've continued to live by that as we innovate. And so again, we really own our place of like we're this picks and shovels company living in the background, but yeah, we're excited. We do feel like we have almost, let's see, golly, we're almost 1,000 customers today, and like really feel like they do collectively trust us to just bite off that pain point and deal with it, and we bring real impact, real value as a result, and totally plan to continue to invest and innovate around making that better and better.
Landon, that's an awesome place to bring this to a close. And I really appreciate you investing some time with us here at Multifamily Collective and the Multifamily Media Network. Where can people find out more about you and your platform?
Yeah, simply pestshare.com. Our website's a good place to go. Our socials a go. We've got our LinkedIn page. We've got a Facebook page too. We put a lot of content on too. But and honestly, feel free to email me, landon@pestshare.com. I'm a pretty open book. I love to meet people in the space and network, and so don't hesitate. And yeah, we're totally here to support the space.
Well, as it is the day before Thanksgiving, I want to wish you and your family happy Thanksgiving again. Thank you for spending some time with us this morning, and appreciate you.
Yeah, happy Thanksgiving. Thanks, Mike.